You're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio, featuring the Interactive Interview, courtesy of WrestlingEpicenter.com. Hello, this is James Walsh. Is this Steve Keirn?
It is. How you doing, James?
How you doing, sir?
I'm phenomenal, man. I'm phenomenal.
It's such a pleasure to speak with you. It really is an honor to do this, and I'm so happy that you agreed to do it with me. I think we're going to have some fun.
Thanks. I'm humbled. I mean, you didn't have to say that. I'm still going to do it.
I appreciate it. And, you know, it's funny because my kid always asks me, who do you share a birthday with? And I shared a birthday with no one. And I just looked it up, and you and I share a birthday. We're 30 years to the day apart, but we share a birthday. So there you go.
Wow, isn't that a coincidence? You also share a birthday with Don Morocco then.
Oh, I'll take it. That's good
Don
company
Morocco,
to keep.
And of course he's passed, but Mr. Wrestling #2, Johnny Walker, was on September 10th also.
Awesome. All right, are you ready to get started?
Sure.
All right, we'll get started here in 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome back to Interactive Wrestling Radio. Joining us for the first time ever, I can't believe it's never happened before, but joining us to promote his new book is a true legend of professional wrestling. You might know him as Skinner. You might know him as the Fabulous One. He is Steve Keirn. Are you with me, sir?
I am. Good to talk to you, James.
It's such a pleasure to have you on. Like I said, I've been doing this 20 years, and I don't know why, but somehow we've just never crossed paths. So honestly, it's an honor to have you on.
Wow, I appreciate it. It's an honor to be on. Now that we're all honored out there, huh?
That works. So the matter at hand, the reason we're having you on is to talk about the Keirn Chronicles, Volume 1, which is out now. And, man, I've been thumbing through this book. It's such an interesting read. It's a big book. It's 400 pages. But let's talk about the book. What made you decide this was the right time to put pen to paper and get this book out?
Well, you know, I'm surrounded by my peers that have written books, and then, you know, people encouraging me to write a book because of the differences in my career opposed to just, you know, a few people. And then plus a 44 years in wrestling business, you know, from the time I was just a kid through to the time that I owned the developmental FCW and retired. It was, you know, there's a lot of history there. And the young guys and girls that I taught, first of all, encouraged me because if they wanted to read, they wanted to know a little bit more about me. And then, you know, just friends are saying, well, you should write this stuff down. Well, one of my obstacles, James, to be honest with you, is not memory. I'm pretty sharp for 71 years old, I think. I keep telling my wife if I start doing anything that's really like I'm crazy, just let me know because I don't think you know when you go nuts. But
that's right.
But
you just think everybody else is crazy.
Oh, well, you know, I talk to some friends that are kind of like borderline right now that are a few just a little older, and I'm not going to drop names, but I mean, you know, my career expanded, you know, 4 generations. And as just for an example, Brian Blair's a really close friend of mine living here in Tampa, too, real close to me. And when we go down, let's say Monday Night Raw comes in or SmackDown or something, and sometimes we'll go down to the arena just to see the talent. And Brian's amazed at how many gaps of generations come running up to say hello, just to say hello and a hug and how's it going? And he goes, man, how do they know you? I said, I taught those guys, or I had part in teaching them, but at the same time, you know, and then a lot of them are second generation wrestlers. And that's kind of like, you know, something that I was blessed to deal with because a lot of my really close friends, their kids came through me. So, you know, I've known them since they were sending Christmas cards when they were in 3rd grade. I mean, you know, and they were on their parents' Christmas cards. And I'm going, I'm going to bring you some of these Christmas cards in and show the rest of the talent if you don't straighten up. So, anyway.
That was the cool thing about reading some of the Amazon reviews is that at least 2 of them that are on there now was by students of yours. People saying that maybe I'm biased, but I needed to hear this story. And it's such a wonderful read. And, yeah, that seems to be, if that's who it was intended for, they're definitely getting the message.
Well, you know, one of the things that I've gotten so far as reviews and friendship critiques and stuff like that, because I like the challenge. I mean, this is my first book, and I didn't graduate the top of my high school class. When I went to high school, it was like there was so many of my peers that ended up in the wrestling business that we were lucky to just get through. But to take on a project like this and then be challenged by it just kind of left me in that position. Well, people want to hear the story and people want to fill in the gaps, and it's almost impossible to put 44 years down. 400 pages sounds like a lot, but I'm amazed at so many of my friends that have told me how fast they went through it. A day and a half. I mean, they just got to the point where they said they couldn't put it down and wanted to continue reading, and, even said how easy it was to read. I go, well, it wasn't like a genius was in the process of having it written, so I tried to make it simple.
How did Ian Douglas, who, by the way, helped you write the book, but also helped set up this interview, how was he to work with to helping you piece it together?
Man, he's incredible. I'm looking forward to finishing the second book. And I mean, he's so smart. I mean, and I don't mean smart like Mark Smart or whatever. I mean smart like an intelligent man. And to have the opportunity to work with somebody, it was almost like a blessing from God, because I would have never been able to do this if it hadn't been for Ian. I'm sure there's other people that could have wrote my autobiography, but what I wanted was somebody that had passion, not just somebody that wanted to write books about wrestlers or for wrestlers. I wanted somebody who had a passion for the wrestling business, because the only true appreciation for when you're dictating to them is them being excited about hearing the stories. I mean, when they never watched wrestling, like a lot of my students at FCW, they never watched wrestling. The only wrestlers they knew were like John Cena, and I'm going, really? Anyway, but when you have it, then it's pretty hard to kind of like put down in words a guy's life story that doesn't have any real interest in what really happens in the wrestling business, like behind the scenes or on the road or wherever it's at, but can put it together and make it an easy read for people to understand and not go, what the hell are they talking about? So he's really smart, and I'm blessed to have him as a friend, and he's a tremendous writer. I'm trying to push Jerry Briscoe into possibly maybe having him nominated for some award that Jerry Briscoe has some opportunity to do as a writer's award. It starts with a
well
name,
deserved,
but I can't remember if it's I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, it's an award.
Oh, well, you said passion, and part of the reason I found out that this book was out there, you probably know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, was that CM Punk put an Instagram post out about talking about how it was the best book he's read in years and really complimenting it. He also writes the foreword for the book. What is your relationship like with CM Punk, and why was he the right guy to do the foreword?
Well, there were several variables in that, and here's the thing. Because I'm kind of like in the business where it's a personality thing, and my objective was not be the main event. My objective was get along with my peers so nobody killed me out there. And the other thing is, to help people when it came my time. But CM Punk and I have known each other for years. I watched him grow. I watched him come out of the indies and stuff, and then I watched him when he developed into the WWE. And I had the opportunity to choose my people to write forwards. Of course, Stan Lane was a given because he is half of the Fabulous Ones, and that's where the book goes. It goes up to the end of the Fabulous Ones tag team, and Stan goes on WCW and becomes Bobby Eaton and Midnight Express, and I kind of like float around trying to be an owner, promoter. I mean, I'm juggling things in Florida trying to make things happen and, go through some great times and bad times, but just more wrestling stories. But with CM Punk, the reason I chose him, because I had to explain it to him. I could ask a lot of my friends, and I could do the name-dropping friendships, like, okay, well, here's so-and-so wrote the foreword to his book, and he's just trying to sell his book by having their name on it. Well, that's not the objective. The objective is to get somebody to give you a true, honest opinion about you, So when people read it, it's not it's not blown out of proportion, but it makes sense. And I tried to explain to him, I said, CM, you know me, but you really don't know me deep. I mean, you didn't spend hours on the road with me, and you sure aren't as old as I am, and you didn't go through the territorial days like I did, but you have a passion for the business, and your passion shows me that what you don't know about me, you can sure enough find out by Googling me and getting in depth. Wikipedia has quite a history on me. I mean, there's so many avenues now to use for research that you're such a, young, intelligent guy that's done really well and kind of in my category, whereas you don't have a family name. You're not tied to anybody politically. You're a guy that came into the business hoping you could get wherever you could get and be happy with whatever you had. And you've succeeded, plus you've done well beyond. And so I'd rather have a forward from somebody that has opinion about me that's not so biased because they're trying to suck up to me because if they got to see me all the time or something, and go, I can't believe what you wrote about me. You think I'm going to print that? So, but, my friends would be over embellishing. They would be like, they would want to put stuff in there almost to the point where it was sappy, and I knew that. And so I said, well, everybody in the business is my friend. There's no doubt. See, I have a respect for talent that goes beyond most people, and it's because I respect anybody that comes through that front door wanting to be in the business. If you got the guts to do that, then you must really want to do it. And so what happens to you is usually not your position to predict or to dictate. Yours is just to get a job and do whatever you're told and hope you get something good. And if you don't, just do the best you can with what you get. So, I mean, that was kind of a long story for you, James, about CM, but I don't want to lighten the idea that, I just picked him out of my butt and said, hey, would you write this for me? I mean, there's other friends.
Like I said, though, I found out about the book from his Instagram post, so that had to help, the awareness of the book, the fact that he did put that out there. And, of course, it was tied to some of his dramas, if you will, but
right.
It definitely sheds some light on the book, which I think is a good thing.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I didn't pick him because he was the most over wrestler in the wrestling business so far as the fans. I'm allowed to call them fans now that I'm not an agent for Vince. The day he told us in the production meeting, all of us older guys, the producers that were all ex-wrestlers, well, we're not going to call them fans anymore. And we looked at each other, go, boy, this is going to be good. And, because it's not an insult to be called a fan. I mean, there's baseball fans, football fans, but Vince said they're insulted, so we're going to call them the universe.
Oh, boy.
So that's going to take a little getting used to for me and Arn and Fit and, Mike Rotundo. We're sitting in there at the production meeting looking at each other. Okay, man, you're going to have to help me with this one. I mean, I'd already made the mistake. They tried to assign me to the midgets one time, and when I said midgets, Vince went through the ceiling on me.
Uh-oh, no,
they're
little
not
people.
Midgets, they're little people. Okay, Vince, I'm not insulting them. I'm just saying that's all I've ever known them from. Since I was a kid, I used to go watch the midgets wrestle. Now you're telling me to call them little people and go out there and teach them little people high spots, not midget high spots. I got it. So I don't have to be on my toes anymore. That's another thing. I'm not a loose cannon. I mean, so far as trying to do stuff to get back at anybody, I have no remorse or any regrets about my career. I mean, I understood it as a business from day one, and I'm grateful for everybody that contributed. I mean, you don't always get along with your boss, but I had a lot of bosses, and so you have to learn to deal with it because they're the ones that are running it. So you can either stand up and keep getting a U-Haul, or you can accept it and do the best you can to get over with them. So,
pretty cool. It was an interview that Kevin Sullivan did a couple years ago when he kind of told a story about your father and how he would have. How the plan was different for yourself and Bob Backlund, and you could have been in Bob Backlund's shoes and been the champion. not going into all that, but just to open up and tell the whole world about your family history and all the hardships that came along with that, and the fact that your dad was a twice prisoner of war. Was that a difficult thing to let everybody into, or is it something like, it's time to let them in?
No, you're talking about 50 years ago. I mean, we just came up on the anniversary of him coming home. He came home in 1972. And so, right in that era. So anyway, when you talk about that, I mean, there was it was just a void. And here's what happened. I mean, I grew up in Tampa, but that's not where I was born. I was born in Ohio, but my dad was in the Army Air Corps during World War II. And at 19 years old, he was in World War II in Germany, based out of England, and he was in a battle called the Bloody 100. Well, he was a co-pilot on a B-17, which is a big bomber. And it was called the Bloody 100 because that was the most notorious battle in World War II for shooting down B-17s. And they shot down a ton of them, including my dad's plane. And so 19 years old, he gets shot down in Germany, gets captured. He's a POW there for 9 months and comes home. War's over. No real need for the military as strongly. And he was a pilot. That was his dream from the time he was a little kid, being a fighter pilot. And he had had to take his second seat to being a B-17 co-pilot. But he stayed in the Air National Guard, which is like the reserves. And that way he could fly on the weekends or once a month or whatever. And then while he was doing that, he became a highway patrolman in Ohio and a Boilermaker, and they were always going on strikes, and there was always a danger of getting shot and stuff. And so he went back, and the Air Force started, I think it was in the early 1950s, and he joined. And from then on, I came along in 51, and we were in Ohio for maybe 6 months out of my life, and we moved to Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, Okinawa. We lived over in Okinawa for 2 years, to North Carolina for 2 years, and ended up at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, where my dad got qualified to fly the fastest fighter ever, and that was the F-4 Phantom. And his dream had come true. Only thing was, his first thing came along was a Cuban crisis, and he was patrolling the whole southern borders of the United States every day for about the Cuban missiles and everything, and nothing really happened. And the Vietnam War escalated. My dad was sent to Vietnam, and on July 24th, 1965, he was shot down with the first SAM missile ever used. And his job that day and his mission was to fly around Hanoi, shoot up Hanoi, fly back out, and on the way out, go over the SAM missile sites and see if they were using them and see how accurate they were. They, out of the 5 planes, he shot my dad's down. Well, that's the basic on the military side of it. Now, here I am. I'm 13 years old in Tampa, Florida, and I come home on a summer afternoon, and all these military cars are in my front yard. I walk through the front door, and the guy grabs me by the arm real stiff and drags me down the hallway, and I'm going right by my mother who's crying. And I'm going, had no idea. And I mean, as the military cars was a big signal, of course, but I mean, you're 13 and there had been no experience with war in my life. And then boom, this guy sits me down on the bed and said, "Son, your dad died today. He was shot down over Vietnam. His plane exploded. He was shot down with a SAM missile, first one ever used. He's dead. You're the man of the family." Well, I started crying. I mean, I'm a pretty emotional person anyway, but my dad just got killed. And this guy shakes me a little bit, not like rude shake, but kind of like strength shake maybe is what it was. He said, "You're the man. You are the man of your family. You have to release the emotion and then just toughen up." He says, "Your mom's only got you. You're the only man. So you have to become the man of your family, and your dad wouldn't be proud of you if he saw you crying." And I'm going, okay, well, that was easy for you to say. But anyway, long story short, that was my struggle. And Mike Graham and I went to school together along with Hulk Hogan and Austin Idol and Dennis McCord, Austin Idol, but Dick Slater. And So when we were in school, I got to be close friends with Mike, and Mike was like a rich kid at the poor school. He wasn't even supposed to be at Robinson High School where I was at. He was supposed to be at the rich kids' high school, but his dad wanted him to get tough, so his dad Eddie had him sent to Robinson. And anyway, it had a little bit more of a reputation of just being a little rougher, and I think it was low-income families was mainly the reason. But anyway, we grew up together. We became friends. I'd hang out. When I go over to his house, his dad was all over me because he was a big patriot. He knew what my dad was doing and sacrificing his freedom. And so he just asked me if I needed anything. And of course, here's a guy mega rich and we were mega poor. I mean, you got $5. No, I didn't say that. but he was so generous. He took me fishing with him all the time. He offered to take me hunting. I'd go hunting. I mean, I did a lot of stuff. Mike was an only child, so Eddie didn't mind including me. And then plus, I don't know if it was just the way it worked out, but a lot of times he'd introduce me and tell his friends, which were wrestlers, this is his son, his dad's a prisoner of war in Vietnam, and then everybody was always real. I mean, it was a door opener for me, but it was a hard situation to be in. But that's kind of opened the door into the wrestling business for me. But I started picking guys up from the airports and hotels and driving them around to the local arenas when I was 16 years old. And it was very kayfabe business at the time. I mean, nobody talked about the business. I wasn't allowed in the dressing rooms, but I saw the guys, and I saw them after really, bloody matches where they, used a lot of blades and cut up and they beat up, and I'm looking at them and I'm going, there's nothing, I don't have nothing to do with this business. I mean, I was not a fan so far as, man, I can't wait to be a pro wrestler. That was like kind of on the last of my list. And then when I got time to graduate, Eddie's pushing me, and he asked me a lot of questions. And when I was growing up, whenever I had a man question, I'd ask Eddie. And so he became like a second father to me. And when I went away to college, I went to Jackson, Mississippi, and I went to a college just outside of Jackson where Ted DiBiase lives now. It's in Clinton, Mississippi. It's called Mississippi College, and it's a small Baptist college. And I had nothing so far as background prerequisites for school. I mean, I had my biggest accomplishment was I was good at phys ed. I mean, so I was working out at a gym downtown in a YMCA in Jackson, and I got close to a bunch of police officers that are down there on a powerlifting team, and they introduced me to steroids and got me on steroids, and I went from 165 to about 240. And came home for Thanksgiving, and Eddie looked at me and he's going, "Oh my God." He's going, "What happened?" And I told him. I mean, I just said, "Well, these cops got me into powerlifting, and I've been powerlifting, and I just got bigger because I squat and I deadlift and all these things." And he goes, "Wow, you put on some real size." Well, Mike got married, and I was in his wedding, and Eddie, because my look, Eddie was constantly saying, "Hey, listen, if that college thing don't work out, I got a place for you." And so college didn't work out. I mean, college didn't even come close to working out. So I went back and I said, "Yeah, well, I need to try it." And then, of course, if you know anything about Florida wrestling history, it's not the same kind of entry level as any place else.
Hiro Matsuda, yep.
In Florida, it was compared to the dungeon up there in Calgary, because Stu Hart was like an Eddie Graham, and probably a couple other places. But I know that as a kid, I was about 18 at the time when Eddie asked me to start riding with Mike and go into some of the towns and either get in there and ring announce, or later on I got to where I could referee a little bit and stuff just to get used to being in front of people. And when I went to break in, I mean, they beat the shit out of me every day. I mean, I'd go to the sportatorium and come home, and Matsuda would stretch me. He'd have me do squats to a deck of cards, and then he'd have me do push-ups and neck bridges. And then my sister could have beat me then, but he didn't really have to do that. He was capable of beating me without all of that, but he had a rag doll on his hands. But when I'd come home, my mom would look at me and she'd go, hey, she goes, what's wrong with your face? And I said, those are called mat burns, Mom. That's when you try to kiss the mat and you get your face drug around on it. And she goes, Steve, I really thought wrestling was fake. And I looked at my mom, and I'll never forget. I said to my mom, I says, so did I. I said, remember what I told you why I didn't want to be a wrestler? I saw all these guys all beat up. Now I know how they got beat up. And they go to the sportatorium, and when they're breaking in, they beat them to death. And so I'd witnessed some stretch shootings there as a kid where they beat them really bad in that sportatorium. And so I kind of lost. I didn't know where to go. I had no position in life and no focus going anywhere. And then I just fell into it, and then I fell in love with it. And then 6 months after he beat me to death, they started teaching me how to work, which is nothing more than a handful of moves, and put me on the road doing 15-minute Broadways with guys old enough to be my grandpa. And that's how you learned back then. You didn't go to the gym and learn to arm drag and hip toss and body slam or drop toe hold. You went into the ring, and some old timer called it while you're in there, and you just kind of give it the best shot you had. And then you developed over time. So,
absolutely. You mentioned Hiro Matsuda, of course, as a kid who grew up in the Northeast. You heard Hulk Hogan tell the story about getting his leg broken by Hiro Matsuda, and all the time that was always a story that you heard. And you, having lived through it and lived through going through those tough trainings before they kind of broke you in, did you take any of those teachings with how you approach training now? Because you're obviously one of the most respected trainers of the past 20 years. Do you have that kind of toughness, or is it a lot maybe gentler on the guys now?
No, and it's not gentle. Wrestling business is not gentle. So even though first of all, I'm not what's considered a shooter. I mean, somebody like Mike Rotundo or somebody, one of the Malenkos Haku, they could all go in there and beat people up. But this was my theory, because I started teaching in 1981. I taught Tracy Smothers just because I knew there was an end, and you need to be able to do something else besides wrestle. And I had vowed not to be an old wrestler. I don't want to embarrass my family, myself, or the people that had supported me, because I was an aggressive wrestler and I didn't want to drop down to a level where I didn't do anything in the ring. So teaching was going to be my next step. But I didn't want to bring old theory, because if this is what I carried out of old theory, after I learned the business and after I'd been in it about 5 years, there was times when I was on the road, kind of maybe sitting in the back seat quiet, and I'm thinking to myself, now why in the hell did Matsuda beat me as bad as he did a couple of those days? Did it really make me any better, or did it make me want to protect the wrestling business and be very kayfabe? And it really, psychologically, that's what it was all about. But by the time I started teaching and educating, the business is not a kayfabe business anymore. It's a different industry. And so they've enlightened everybody. So why am I going to try to create the same thing? We were taught that if anybody approached us in bars, which they did a lot in the 70s, and say, hey, man, you one of them wrestlers, right? Yeah. Well, what do you think about a wrestler against a black belt karate guy? And now I got to say, because this has been an experience that I've been a part of, I got to say, so you the black belt karate guy? Because I'm the wrestler. Yeah. I said, well, here's the deal. Let's go outside the bar here, get in that phone booth out front, and see who comes out of it. And the guy would look at you, like you had too much confidence, and then either decline or, try to figure out a nice way out of it. But you had to stand your ground. That was part of the deal. You protected the business not with your life, because people didn't fight like that. It was a slug fist usually in the bars and wherever you ended up. And pretty much, wasn't a whole lot of wrestling moves. It was just slug it out. But 9 times out of 10, you had them beat because of confidence right off the bat. And then you had certain weapons like knowing how to stand close, don't get out at a distance where somebody can reach out and really whop you, get up on top of them, so it's going to be hard to hit you. And when it happens, you have things to taking them down and, whatever. But it's not a shooter thing. It's just it's protection for your life kind of a deal that we learned. So, I didn't want to teach students and have them come back at me and say, well, why did you do all that stuff to hurt me and to beat me up and to all of that kind of stuff when it wasn't real all along? I couldn't face that. So times changed and so did the training change. It doesn't make it any easier. Don't misunderstand, because to me, I taught so many people that 9 times out of 10, none of them thought about the things that were going to hurt them the most. When they came with the attitude like, oh, yeah, I want to learn a lot of moves. Oh, yeah, well, how many moves can you teach me? Oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. So, okay, well, let's get past hitting the ropes, okay? Because once you hit these ropes, which were 9 times out of 10, except for the WWF, whatever it was, were ropes. There was a 20-foot ring with real ropes. The rest of them were 18 by 18 cable with steel cable covered with a garden hose. And they're pulled as tight as they could get. And when you throw a 200-and-something-plus pound body against it, it just pinches all that fat from your underarm to your hip to your knee, and it beats you to death just hitting the ropes. And then taking bumps in a cold gym, that hurts. It's like practicing football before the game. When you're practicing all week long, everything hurts. You go out in the game and you don't feel nothing. Okay, well, same thing with this industry. So I just had the option of being the one that was calling the shots, and here's what I said. We're going to teach them how to work. Let's start from day one. Let's teach them to work. That's what they're going to learn. They don't need to learn anything else. They need to learn to go right straight to work. But let's add some of the things that's old school. One of the biggest old school moves that you don't see very much anymore, but it was, if I was to write a book on how to teach somebody to wrestle, one of the first things is, my deal is you're on the stage as soon as you come out of that curtain. Mm-hmm. So be on that stage, no matter if you're in front of a high school gym or in front of WrestleMania. Make them feel like they're paying to see something that it's worth it, or that maybe you wouldn't be so easy if you got in there with them. And walk through the audience with confidence and command. Look at them. Don't be afraid of them. They've paid to see you. So give them what you got. And the first thing you do when you climb up on that ring is wipe your damn feet off. Wipe your feet off before you step foot in that ring. Because if you step on something on the way to that ring and it gets on that bottom of that wrestling boot and gets into that ring, then it may not be the next match, but it may be another match. But whatever you injured somebody, that could get an eye, could be anything, piece of glass. In arenas, you never know what's on the floor that you walk through. So that's part of the education. But hardly anybody teaches that anymore. But that's because at the rings, I tell you to examine the ring when you get in the territory days, hit the ropes, pull on the turnbuckles, check the pads in the corners, make sure they're tied on. Look for holes in the mat, look for holes in the ring by walking the patterns straight across both ways, then diagonally from corner to corner, and there you travel. Now you'll know if there's any holes in the ring. Well, they don't have to do those things anymore. Those rings are like, tended to like, it's gold. And so in the olden days, though, in independent shows and not big promotions, you never knew what you had when you stepped into the ring. You really had to take the ring for a test run. I can remember jerking ring posts, and going, uh-oh, I can break this.
Good friend of mine was
flying into the corner tonight. So
A good friend of mine was Manny Villalobos from Texas, and he was
Okay.
injured severely by a bad ring. One of the boards was up. He took a bump on it, and it ruined his back. And he claims that he was about to get an opportunity, thanks to Michael Hayes, to do something with WWE as help train, and that took him out of it. So I can totally relate to that. That the
Well,
rings
yeah,
could be dangerous.
it's this to me, because this has been my whole life. This is easy things to talk about, but a lot of people won't relate. But then there's going to be people like you, James, that had somebody that got hurt. I mean, I've seen things happen. I've seen the top rope break, and people don't understand when you're hitting that rope with the confidence that it ain't going to break. You throw your body weight into that bad boy at 100 miles an hour, hoping it's going to recoil you, but when it snaps, there's nothing there. There is nothing there. When that
All right.
turnbuckle breaks, you got your right arm over that top rope on hitting the ropes, and as you turn and it breaks, you got nothing but thin air when it goes dead, and the next rope is right about your waist below. And so it just rips your feet out from under you. And you can come right straight over end, and hit your head on the edge of the mat right there and actually break your neck. You can snap your neck. I mean, there was a lot of things, but, I was blessed. I mean, I was never that fat to begin with, so it wasn't like a big fat guy hitting the ropes. But at the same time, I mean, most of the time, the only time I ever had a rope break, I had a pretty good grip on it, and I held on to the top rope with my right arm and swung around it. I hit on my butt on the apron, so I didn't really take too bad a bump, but it was a rush. I mean, it's definitely a rush.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's fast forward just a little bit. I don't want to keep you too long, but I do want to run through a few more highlights here.
Sure.
The fabulous ones. If people talk about Steve Keirn, just as I did in the introduction, there's two major runs that people remember probably more than any others. And then, of course, one's the fabulous ones, the other is Skinner. I got to tell you, when I'm listening to classic rock radio, which I do most of the time,
Right.
Sharp Dressed Man comes on, I picture you and Steve. I'm sorry, I picture you and Stan. That's my first thought. That's my first thought. It just got in my mind.
Well, that was the genius of Jerry Jarrett, who we lost not too long ago. But Jerry Jarrett created all of that. The industry has a way of blessing you and cursing you. And I'll give you an example. I mean, the Fabulous Ones was a blessing. It was the right time. The timing was perfect. It was the beginning of MTV. They just started showing music videos on television, and all generations were pumped because you'd see your artists that played the music, and you'd see them doing some kind of little skit thing or whatever, but it just made you entertained by watching it instead of just hearing the song. And Jarrett came up with the idea, of course, we were patterned after the Fabulous Fargos, who were a tag team in that Tennessee territory for years that were like Rover. I mean, Jackie Fargo was the Dusty Rhodes of Tennessee, so far as Florida was Dusty's hot spot. But Jackie Fargo was the man. And the team, the Fabulous Fargos, I mean, they had great feuds and stuff during those eras, and the people, really loved them as baby faces. And so when they endorsed us and said we're the Fabulous Ones, we're being, managed and put together by Jackie Fargo, he just handed us all of his fans right there on a silver platter. I mean, getting over as a baby face wasn't always easy because you had some obstacles when you're a baby face, especially territorial days, and that you had to go out and impress people 7 nights a week, 52 times a year in the same city. Every Monday night, Memphis Coliseum, Tuesday was Louisville. You had to be in those cities 52 times, and you had to be different. You couldn't be because it didn't take them long to, it wasn't like they would forget what you did the week before. They would come and you go out there. You better not do the same match. You better give them something totally different, some kind of different thing, and it be like that. When Jerry Jarrett put us together, I was already a probably 12-year veteran from NWA territories, the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida. I mean, so I had kind of an education with some of the best workers in the world who actually made me look better than I was and plus taught me in the ring. And so when I came there, I was a veteran that if you handed me the ball, I'm going to run with it. I mean, whether you like it or not, I'm going to run with the ball. And so Stan and I were such good friends and such a good partnership because and the whole time we were together, we never had an argument, a disagreement. I mean, any harsh words or silence in the car or any of that kind of stuff. Well, we did double team a lot of guys sometimes in the car and stuff because we were good at getting on them. I mean, we were the nasty boys with tuxedos on before they came along. But at the same time, it was it was a good pairing. And the Fabulous Ones it was a start of a new era. There wasn't anything compared to us. Most of the guys there didn't work out, so they had, not great bodies. They're big men and stuff, but they just didn't look like, the same as Stan and I did. And then, having the closeness of from a distance, we looked a lot alike with blonde hair and beards and stuff. And so even beards weren't a big thing back then. Now, I even told an FCW, I said, man, if you want to get over with Vince, grow a beard. I mean, he's a freak for beards. I don't know what it is, but if you go in there, you better have a beard.
There you go.
And if you look at the roster, tell me I'm wrong. Maybe I am, but I mean, every time somebody comes out and says, well, I know Vince likes him, look at the beard. Anyway, so, but back then we started a trend. And as well as I do, the most sincere form of flattery is imitation. Mm-hmm. And man, the market flooded with imitation Fabulous Ones and close, similarities and stuff and music videos and the whole thing. It just started an era. And, it's not anybody's fault. Everybody's trying to make a living. So, there was never any heat. I mean, the Fantastics were a little edgy because, I mean, that was almost like too close. And that was like the same videos, the same music, the same outfits. We're going like, wait a minute. Now you're starting to get a little too close. And whenever somebody says something to me and they go, well, that was fantastic, I look at them right away. I go, no, that was fabulous. Fantastics with them two little guys that looked like us. So anyway.
Absolutely. I've interviewed Bobby Fulton before and Tommy Rogers as well. What a great, they were a good team. Not to insult you, but they were not fabulous.
No, they were a good team. The only thing that, here's the whole thing, James, and I'll make this statement and, you'll hear it a million times from me, but I'm a realist. You're not going to make everybody happy no matter who you are and what you do. But wrestling is strictly an opinion. The wrestling business is an opinion, and that opinion's based on the individual. Like you and I are going to have differences of opinions if we looked at stuff together and I said, what do you see? And I'll say what I see. Well, here's the thing. It's based on your experience, your education, your upbringing, what impressed you the most about wrestling, what do you like the most about wrestling, what are your favorite characters, what do they do that you like the most, and then it's different everywhere. And it really, when it was territorial days, it was really a big difference. If you worked in Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, you'd had the same working style. You jumped to New York and upper state, you had to be almost a nationality. You know, you had to be a Italian. I mean, you had to be a Polish. I had to be a white meat baby-faced cracker. I don't know what I'd have been. I mean, I have no clue. But it wasn't nothing with an unusual flag. I mean, so, but it was just different styles. You go to Japan, it's a whole different style. It's a culture shock. Your first time to wrestle in Japan, you're used to the audience making noise, and in Japan, they just sit and watch the whole match. And at the end, they give you a golf clap. Like they all get up and give you a nice little golf clap, like they're at 19 or 18 holes. I don't know how many holes in a golf game, but whatever. And they're watching the final hole. Yeah, probably. and Tiger Woods thinks a hole in one. They'll, hey, very good, very good, very good. So you had to get used to working to an audience, and you're thinking, man, at home the people would be standing up, jumping through their ass if I did that. And here they're not moving. Man, are they looking this way? I mean, pretty soon you're starting to watch the audience like, what are you guys doing? So
one of Jim Cornette's favorite stories to tell is how Vince McMahon tried to bring in the Midnight to do action figures for them, and that he didn't talk to him at all about wrestling. He just was, we can make a doll. Well, when you went up to WWE as Skinner, you got a doll. You got the action figure. I talk to a lot of guys today, a lot of young guys, and it's like their world has changed when they get an action figure. From a veteran like yourself who had been in the business for that long to have gotten an action figure at that point, did that mean anything different to you? How did you view getting put in plastic form like that?
Well, I was in the very first ones. Mm-hmm. Stan and I were in the tag team dolls made by Remco in the AWA.
Remco, that's right. You were in those. Oh, gosh.
We were in the very first ones. The dolls are, man, it's like I went to Toys R Us. Mm-hmm. I was like 30 years old, and I went to Toys R Us in Minneapolis, and I walked in the back, and I saw myself on the shelf as an action figure. Plus, I looked 10 times better as an action figure than I did in real life. I pulled them all off the rack into a basket, and I went to the front, the counter to pay for them. And the guy goes, he said, looks at me, and he goes, "You must really like wrestling, huh?" And I go, "No, this is." I said, "No, bro, this is me right here." And he looked at the doll, and he looked at me, and he looked back at the doll, and he looked at me, he goes, "No way." And I'm going, "Hey, man," I pulled my driver's license out and showed him, "This is my last name, man. That's me. That is me. See that name right there? That is me." And he goes, "Wow, I guess it makes sense." And I bought them all. I mean, I've got 5 grandchildren, and they've all got a brand new in the box, in the carton, whatever, signed by me and Stan, Action Fabulous Ones dolls. But I didn't mean to get off of your question, but I was ecstatic about getting that. And then it just kind of went a little bit cold after we left, and then we traveled around a little bit more and went to Florida, and then we split up. I mean, it was nice to have an action figure, but then all of a sudden everybody got them. By the time I got to WWF in early 90s, it was when, of course, you got a Skinner, but everybody was a gimmick. And the action figures were cool because, it's like when I walked into Vince, I go, "Man, I don't know what you want me to be. You know all about me. I've come here. I've worked for your dad in the 80s. I mean, I don't know." I said, all I got is Steve Keirn, and he looked at me and he goes, "Okay." But I said, "I did kill 15 alligators in the first alligator hunt in the state of Florida." And he goes, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I just participated in the first alligator. It's called a harvest, but it was a hunt the very first time because they'd been on an endangered species list. And I got to kill 15. And I got some monsters. And I've got skins and hides and skulls and paws and teeth and all kinds of stuff." And I laid a bunch of stuff on his desk that I had brought. And he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, man, this is some cool stuff." And I knew he'd like it because it was different. What else did he have there? He had Undertaker, Big Boss Man. He had just, but it wasn't a Skinner guy there. So, well, little did I know that was what it was going to be. But he told me, he says, "Well, man, yeah," he said, "go home for a month and let your hair grow back out to natural brown and let your beard grow. Let it get long, shaggy, not that, not that Miami Vice look you got going on." And I go, "Yeah, well, I consider myself cute." I said, I've been a fabulous one now for 6 years. I mean, my objective was being cute. And he goes, "Yeah, okay." So then when I came back, he goes, "Okay, Steve, we got the character for you." And I'm thinking, this is going to be good. And he said, "Did you see the movie Deliverance?" And I go, "Yeah, about 10 times. I mean, I was really sucking up to Vince then as a young guy. And I was going, yeah, I was going to agree with everything. And he goes, "Well, I want you to be one of those guys in the movie." And I go, first thing crossed my mind, James, is he wants me to be Burt Reynolds. He's wanting me to be Burt Reynolds. I said, "You mean Burt Reynolds, right?" And he looked at me and goes, "No." And I'm going, well, he's the only cute one in that movie. And he goes, well, you ain't going to be cute. He goes, I want you to be one of the two guys in the woods that says to Ned Beatty, hey, boy, you got a right pretty mouth. And I'm going, hey, that would be no problem, because riding in cars, when you've got a lot of time and you work in redneck territories at times, you develop the ability to speak redneck. I mean, it's like, if you have to stop and ask directions in Mobile, Alabama, you better say, hey, man, how do you get to the building here, the wrestling building? Because if you ask them and talk to them like you're from New Jersey, they're not going to send you to the wrestling building. So I was good with it. So, but I had a lot of fun with Skinner. Skinner didn't get, the one thing that I it's not a regret. It's just that sometimes it's hard to explain, but there was some political heat. I had some heat with a couple of people like Freddie Blassie and some other people that were old established veterans from that area that I didn't exactly get along with in Japan, a couple of different shows and stuff. And so there was already a bad word out about. And so I don't know if that carried over to Skinner, but Skinner only got to a certain level and then just became kind of obsolete. And when you've been in the business as long as I had, you saw it. But, they didn't really give him a whole lot of opportunities. I've had people say, well, you'd have been in the Hall of Fame if you'd have won a title. If I'd have won a title, wait a minute. You think we win these titles? They give you the title, So, I mean, when you said that about dolls, I wanted to say, well, that's like belts. I've held over 50 different titles in my life, and I have no belts hanging on the wall of my house. And when people say, well, why don't you have belts? I go, because it's not real. I didn't win those belts. It's not like a baseball trophy that I won off of my merit or a bowling trophy. It's part of a gimmick, a business. You don't win the belt. Somebody tells you they're going to give you the belt. So, absolutely. But it does carry weight. Even when fans consider themselves smart, they still will say things that tells me they're a mark by going, well, you didn't have any titles. Well, do you think that was left up to me? If it would have been left up to me, Hulk Hogan would have been doing jobs for me. I mean, come on, I would have been undefeated. But you don't have that power. So anyway.
Absolutely. You mentioned the Hall of Fame. I have to ask, somebody like yourself who has trained so many of the guys that are going to be featured this weekend at WrestleMania, including the guy in the big dog, if you will, the head of the table. What is your thoughts on ever getting inducted into the Hall of Fame? And if they did call, would you accept?
Well, I've thought about being one of those voices calling out in the distance, like, making a big scene. But here's the thing. I get asked this all the time about the Hall of Fame, but I keep going back to this business is a work. This business is not real. When people go into the Hall of Fame, don't get me wrong, they all deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, but they're not all there on their working levels as being great workers or whatever. Sometimes they're in there for different reasons. Sometimes it's nationalities. I mean, this year I see where Muda's going into the Hall of Fame. Nothing wrong with Muda, but anyway, what did he really do in the WWE and for the history of the WWE that justified that? I mean, Andy
never
Kaufman,
set foot in a WWE ring, ever.
Yeah, and Andy Kaufman, he was a kind of a joke. I was there the night Lawler pile-drived him in Memphis, Stan and I were on the card. And he was kind of a joke in the back. And I mean, and I didn't ever even think he was funny. I mean, it's not like, I mean, you got the wrong guy on if you don't want honesty. But, I mean, the guy that made me even smile, he was no George Carlin, I mean,
That's
at the
right.
time. So for whatever it was worth for him to be in the Hall of Fame, I mean, not that long ago, the Bella Twins were in the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
They just come out of FCW a couple of years ago. I'm going like, I don't put any merit in there. I put it in there as, is that an honor? Obviously, it is an honor, and that's great that those guys and they're in it. And that if it makes them better, and if they get a little boost in their their life or their ego or their career or anything that helps out of it, God bless them. But I'm not upset. I mean, there's guys to me like Bobby Eaton. If they're going to put somebody like Muta in, Bobby Eaton should be in the WWE Hall of Fame. I mean, if the Rock and Roll Express are going to be in the Hall of Fame, Bobby Eaton should have been in there. And even Stan as a Midnight Express, for that matter. I mean, those are the same level, if not during the same time periods. But there's, when even I watched, I think it was Jeff Jarrett get inducted in the Hall of Fame after he had kind of stuck the business up their ass here, and refused to do a job for China unless he got a payoff and all the things that happened. So do I wait? Do I give any weight to the Hall of Fame? No. If I was to be asked to be put in the Hall of Fame, the first thing that I would want to say to him is why.
Wow.
Why now? I mean, maybe when I'm dead, it'll be more useful to you because of it. You could use it somehow or another, but why? I didn't do anything exceptional. I just spent my whole life doing this business, but that doesn't mean you qualify to be inducted into a Hall of Fame. I mean, I've been put into some smaller Hall of Fames around the country, but I looked at the same thing. Those plaques are sitting in the garage. And I tell them I appreciate you, giving me some kind of award here, but I mean, I got to be honest, I wish I could, embellish it a little bit more, but it was a work. The people that should be in the Hall of Fame are the ones that made me look good. My opponents, all of them, Bob Orton Jr., I'm pretty sure he's in, but
Yeah,
I mean,
2004.
Yeah, even Bob Roop. I mean, I don't think he is.
Yeah.
He's
not. No, he should be in. You're right.
Yeah, and there's still guys. Mark Lewin. Mark Lewin's still alive. He should be in the Hall of Fame, if you ask me. But that goes back to what I said earlier, James. Is it's an opinion. I have kind of a different opinion of sometimes what goes on, but that doesn't mean I'm right and they're wrong. It just means that I just see it differently than they do for different reasons. So.
All right. Well, I got two more questions for you, then I can let you off the phone. I'm sorry for chewing your ear off tonight.
No, it's me talking too much. I talk too much, but I hate short answers,
All right. Well, the two questions I have for you is, I already mentioned it. This weekend's main event of WrestleMania has two guys involved that you personally know. Of course, your good friend Dusty Rhodes' son, Cody Rhodes, and then, of course, somebody you helped to train when he first started in wrestling, with Roman Reigns. What's your thoughts on the WrestleMania main event?
Well, my thoughts are it's great, and it's definitely a step up for them to be into these positions so far as high as you can get on the ladder. But at the same time, it's well deserved. I have a partiality to a lot of second generation wrestlers, not because of their dads as much as what their families have done for the industry and how they had sacrificed maybe growing up. I mean, I got two kids of my own, and my son went without his dad at a lot of functions and stuff because I was working. And of course, Roman Reigns, his dad being a worker. I mean, Dusty being a worker. The boys grew up with knowing the business, but not really knowing the business. Mm-hmm. They didn't travel every night on the road. They were just there, and their dads missed a lot of things like birthdays and some holidays. Some of the holidays are the biggest times for wrestling. Thanksgiving, I couldn't remember when I ever ate a Thanksgiving dinner when I was working. Because it was you couldn't eat because you'd throw it up in front of the audience, so you definitely didn't get the enjoyment of having turkey on Thanksgiving Day. But both of them are definitely well deserved to be there, and I'm sure this is another thing, they'll have a really great match. But back to Steve's they look like two men.
Yes.
And they're dressed like wrestlers, and they wrestle, and they both work out, and they look like they are aggressive athletes. And That's what I like. I watched WWE the first time for a long time because I knew it was the build-up show, Monday Night Raw, their last show before going to Mania. And, I know this whole week is a nightmare for talent and production and everything. And I'm looking to see what the build-up is. And, I watched the show, almost the whole show, and I was very impressed by the talent is because they look like men. And I've been watching a lot of shows where I don't see that as much. I see younger, kiddie-looking guys, doing stuff, and small guys, and not workout guys or any kind of athletic guys, and they're doing aerial movement and stuff. And then I try to relate and try to be not the dinosaur, but I try to say, but here's what I learned. And this is why my opinion is like this. When I was a kid, Eddie Graham told me when I broke into the business, he said, kid, you probably won't be into the main events until you're in your 30s. And the reason why is because the audience won't accept you as a man yet. When they see a young, immature kid between 20 and 30, they see a kid. When they see a man 30 that's got 10 years behind him, they know this guy's been through a lot of battles, and this is a man. They're going to respect that man, and they're going to say, hey, I wouldn't want to get in there with him. And that's what people pay to do. They pay to see something that they wouldn't get into. But the whole business, and this is just back to wearing it out, but I'm going to tell you, it's my opinion, but the whole business has changed. And I have a simple scenario. The scenario is, in my era and past it, when the regionalized territories died and all the regionalized territory talent went to Vince, and the matches from start of the show to the end were all main events all around the country. The Von Erichs. It was just endless. It's Ricky Steamboat. But every match was a main event somewhere, and now it could be the first or second match. But what you saw was there was men. And the difference between now and then is then wrestling was based off of emotion. You went out there and you took the people on a ride of good versus evil, and you got them emotionally involved. And that's what got them into it. Now it's movement. It's about movement and memorization. They memorize everything, and they do the movements, which are, way high-risk movements, but at the same time, they do moonsault after moonsault after high-risk after high-risk, but that's what the audience is educated to. That's what they like, and that's what they're paying to see, and that's the difference between what we did. 5 out of 6 territories I worked in, regionalized territories, it was against the rules to come off the top or go over the top. That was
That's
a
right.
DQ.
Yep.
It was a DQ. And when I watch what they do now, I go, well, there's no way I'd be in this business now. I was just not as acrobatic as a turtle. So
I'd say the believability, though, suffers. Like when you get a guy who looks at the crowd for 2 minutes and then does a backflip with never looking back to know if the guy's going to be there, just trusting he's going to be there. As a fan that's watching, you got to think, he could take 3 steps to the right and the guy would just, completely crash and burn. And there's just, with all of the athleticism, there seems to be a loss of the believability of everything.
Well, but it's not supposed to be believable. We've enlightened them. People know it's not. But moonsaults, when you got to land on 3 guys and they got to all stand there with their arms to catch you. If you don't come right away, talk about looking like fools. They're standing there like, okay, well, we're here on the floor waiting for you to jump, bro. But I think about that time when they're trying to get lined up for stuff, and then the timing may not be the perfect time when they're just getting ready to jump, but they got to stand there like they're waiting for you. So, but here's the thing, James. No matter what era it is, it's still successful. So as a dinosaur, do I reject it? Absolutely not. I applaud it. If it's going to keep on going, it's going to go on, but it's not going to turn around and come back. because to sit and watch, sit and watch an hour of Broadway between Jack Briscoe and Harley Race, that'd be hard for an audience now. In an era that I grew up in, that was like something that was like reading my book, 400 pages. You can do it in
Exactly.
it just goes by quick. So,
exactly.
Anyway,
And this was an
question?
education. This conversation was an education, and your book, the 400 pages, the Keirn Chronicles, Chapter 1 or Volume 1, is absolutely an education. I think you already answered my last question earlier in the conversation, but I'll ask it anyway. Will there be a Volume 2?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And while I'm mentioning it, Ian's doing it, and we're probably 85% done. But now that I've sparked all of this, memorying and stuff like that, I'm going to flash back in the second book to some of the things I might have slipped by me that were important stories that I remembered, after the book was ready to come out. And then here's the thing. Ian's written, I think, 5 books with wrestlers, and he's done such a great job. As a matter of fact, that one of the books that everybody should pick up is The Bohemian Rhapsody, and it's about the history of wrestling in the Bahamas, which doesn't have a big following, but it's a whole unique opportunity for a wrestling fan to see a different slant on the wrestling business and wrestling in Nassau, Freeport, and all the little small, there's 700 islands there. We go from Florida and wrestle there. And I've been going to the Bahamas for years to wrestle. And it just has great storyline, but it's an educational book. The Bohemian Rhapsody is the name of that. But with what we're doing on this next one, I know a couple other guys that are actually following me coming out. It's going to be interesting reads too. I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but there's some of my close friends who are writing books now because of the success Ian's shown with me, and saying, okay, well, you got one more book in you, Ian. So, there's going to be a second one, but there again, James, it's about timing. Timing is placing it in a position to whereas it's not too late for people to have lost their interest in the first one to pick up the second one to continue the story, but it's not too early, so it chokes out the first one by people saying, well, this guy's got 2 books, man. That's a lot of reading, So
absolutely.
So, but I've been really lucky that people have accepted as well as they have. And I really have to give the credit to Ian so far as taking what I've given him. We had to go back through, and of course I had to proofread it, and of course I had to edit it. And some of the things that people might notice, and if they don't, I'll bring it to attention, is I don't have like F-bombs in my book, and I don't have language that kids can't read. And the reason is not for everybody's real interest, but my own. I got 5 grandkids that'll probably read my book after I'm long gone. And I don't want them to go from one page to another and say, oh, I can't say that word, I can't believe you used that kind of language or whatever. It's not that I was an angel and I didn't use that language, but why would I do that? And why would I trash people? Why would I just try to ruin people's reputations? And there's some things that I could say that could be kind of cruel and hard-hearted, but I'm not that kind of a person. I'm a Christian. Right. I'm a big follower of Jesus Christ. I believe in God, and here's the thing. What would Jesus do? He's not going to do that. He's going to forget, move on. So, like I said at the beginning, I got no remorse, no regrets. I got no heat. It's not like I'm writing a book to get even with somebody. No.
There's been a few of those, too.
Oh, no, and that's a lot of times that's what fans want to see. Well, I mentioned it on Facebook a couple of years ago. I'm interested in writing a book, what people want to see. And the fans that wrote me were saying, oh, man, we want to see all the drug stories, and we want to see. They just wanted me to trash people and stuff like that. And, that wasn't my responsibility. I had a hard time with the dark side when the dark side was writing. Macho Man and I were best friends, and some of the things I saw I really didn't like because I knew the real person, and that wasn't a fair judgment if you never knew anything about him and you pick it up like that. You're going like, oh, man, he wasn't such a good person. Well, maybe we're not. None of us are, we all fall short. Yeah.
Can I tell you a story? I got angry and turned off the A&E biography because it was no better. It was even worse than The Dark Side on Macho. And I was blessed to have interviewed him 3 times. And the first time I was like, 19 years old, and he agreed to do it, and I was literally jumping up and down like an 8-year-old on Christmas. And, man, to have heard what they did there was just so insulting. And, I'm not going to pretend that I knew him in and out, because I didn't. I was just a fan. And not a universe, but a fan. But, yeah, definitely, I totally get where you're coming from. They were insulting.
Well, it's hate to use it, but it's my opinion again, but I was real close, and I was close to that whole family. I worked with his dad when I was real young. I worked against Angelo Poffo. I knew Lanny. I knew his mom, Judy. I knew that whole family. And there's more to a family when you know all of them and know everything than there was to, some of the things that, I did the dark side, I did the territories with everybody with CWF. And, that was easy because it wasn't looking for nothing to really throw dirt on. But I got asked to do the story about the Grahams, Eddie and Mike. And I had to turn it down because I've had a feeling they were going a bad way with it. And I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be a part of anything that puts people down. So anyway.
God bless you. Well, man, I want to thank you. Genuinely. I said honor a lot at the beginning. And it was absolutely an honor to have you on. I appreciate you taking the time. I obliterated the time frame I told you you'd be on, but I appreciate you taking the time and doing this.
You can edit it down to 10 minutes, not a problem.
I appreciate it, sir. Have a great night, and I will send you an email when I get this up online.
All right, James. Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. And all the people that are listening to your show, I appreciate you being fans. Without fans, there wouldn't be no wrestling business. And if I could teach anybody anything about wrestling, and I taught a lot of them, I taught them that you need to appreciate those people out there in them seats because that's who's paying the bills. I said, a lot of talent want to treat the fans like, I don't have time for them. That's too bad because you don't understand how you made a living and how important they were to you making a living. So with nothing else being said, I know that they don't always all like you, but at the same time, they still might buy a ticket to go see you, and so you get paid. Anyway.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much, sir. James. Great talking to you, too. Have a great night, and tell your wife I'm sorry I kept you so long.
That's all right. She was at choir practice. She just walked in the door.
Good timing.
All right.
Have
James.
A good night, sir. Thank you.
Right,
bye-bye.
Thank you.
This is Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Oh, for us.
Featuring the interactive interview.
Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Oh yeah.
Formerly The Blaze.
The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze rock.
Yo, Maniac, so what you gonna do when the Blaze of Mania runs wild on you?
On WrestlingEpicenter.com.
Wrestling Epicenter.
Wrestling
Epicenter. Wrestling
Epicenter.
Wrestling Epicenter.
Wrestling Epicenter. The Wrestling Epicenter. Don't get off.
And now we shamelessly name drop from our history.
The Wrestling Epicenter would like to apologize for the following.
All right, everybody. Viva la raza. Viva la raza.
Hey, y'all.
Hello, ladies.
Hey, guys. We had a lovely conversation.
First lady.
Absolutely. Oh, look at me. She's so kooky.
Be there. Where else?
Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Wrestling
Epicenter.
Oh, my God.
what? You win! Love being interactive.
I was not shooting. I almost pissed my pants. Breaking neck. I got 2 words for you. I've heard a lot about you guys. Let's go. I see my language. You're going to go to the shop. Into the many.
No nerves.
That was great. It's going to be cool. What it's all about. The purest point of view. The living legend. Champion. Arrogant.
You just make me.
Instead of statement, I'm talking to you. Charisma.
So lonely without you.
In the land of extreme.
Testify. Nevermore. Interactive. Interview. I'm not just the best. Interactive. Interview with a plastic
You
head.
earn the right.
Nobody. You better keep listening. Thank you very much. Controversy creates cash. Professional wrestling.
Made in the USA, baby.
Memphis wrestling. The guy on fire.
We were sexy.
What a show.
The one and only.
Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Wrestling
Epicenter.
Interactive interview. We took care of the business. This isn't ballet. We are huge with this whole You're where it's at. You better recognize who's the best. Make sure to tune in each and every week. I'll come out of your computer. Knock down your door and turn it on for you. Or else I'm going to kick your stinking teeth in. And that's the bottom line.
Have a nice day.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.